Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the lunar eclipse in Aquarius, which takes place on the 27th of July at 8:20 p.m. Universal Time, which translates as 9:20 p.m. here in the UK because the clocks are forward for the summer months. Now, before I go through the actual aspects and the themes for this particular lunar eclipse, I just want to clarify that the astrology doesn't control our lives. It merely helps us to understand what the collective energies are doing, what kind of themes are unfolding at the collective level, and it helps us to understand or give context to what's happening around us so that we then respond to situations rather than reacting to them. But it's up to each and every one of us to make best use of the astrology based on what's necessary in our own personal lives. It doesn't just happen automatically, we actually have to participate in the process. Now, in terms of the lunar eclipse in Aquarius, it's on the southmost, it's dealing with letting go of the past. But with Aquarius, one of the things it's prompting us to try and let go of is let go of rigid thinking patterns or rigid ideas that we cling to, and to expand our current level of perception and understanding beyond the current boundaries of our minds or the current limits, and to question the perceived wisdom that we cling to and question the beliefs that we hold on to that cloud our judgment. It's also looking at where do we hold on to old ideas or hold on to knowledge and not share it because we want to feel special or more important than the people as such. So part of it is also dealing with letting go of any tendencies towards pride and any tendency to feel a need to be aloof so we can feel more special than other people. It's time to move beyond merely having a mental understanding of everything around us to actually living our lives. It's moving from the head to the heart, so to speak, because ideally we want to move towards the north node, which is in Leo, and this is where the sun is at this point in time. But whenever there's a lunar eclipse, we're looking at the past and the future meeting, and this helps us to understand what aspects of the past do we need to be letting go of in order to create space for new future to emerge. For some of us, this is about change on the external level. For others, it's about internal changes, letting go of old cherished beliefs or old ways of thinking that are actually holding us back now and may have served a purpose at one point in our lives, but now they're no longer relevant. This is also time for seeing where do we have a tendency to go with the flow of the crowd rather than being who we are, and where do we have a tendency to feel like we have to gain more knowledge before we take any risks or before we take any action. The thing is, this kind of mindset is unending. I mean, how do you decide when you have enough knowledge before you do something? It's, at the end of the day, it comes to the point where we just have to take that risk, whatever it is. Obviously, there's risk in terms of the moderate risks necessary for us to face any fears and embrace the unknown and express ourselves without really knowing what the end result's necessarily going to be. But it's obviously not taking stupid, irresponsible risks. It's about taking the risks to be who we are, to be our authentic selves in a world that's doing its best to try and make us be anything other than who we are. So what we're looking at is, how can we let go of this tendency to cling to the past, or how can we let go of the tendency to remain cool and aloof to avoid people seeing the more vulnerable side of who we are, and how can we let go of a tendency to remain excessively detached in situations and instead connect with people again. It's learning to let go of the need to be cool and detached and instead embrace that child within ourselves. There's a lot of other aspects taking place at the same time, one of them being that Mars retrograde is going to be opposite the Sun at this point, so we may experience a major releasing going on during this time, a major releasing of any frustrations or certain issues coming to a head at this time. So it's very important here that we do remain calm and we do respond to situations. So when we're feeling these fiery emotions coming up, because Mars deals with anger and suppressed issues, we don't then project it onto other people. We don't unleash all that emotional poison onto others. We take a moment, we take a breath, and we see or question, why is this anger coming up? What is the fundamental or the underlying issue causing it? Quite often anger gets attached to secondary issues that aren't actually the primary reason. So if we do feel a lot of anger coming up, we need to be asking ourselves, what is the real cause of the anger? So asking ourselves, why are we feeling angry, and listen to the reason, and then questioning that and digging down or drilling down to the core of the issue. Is about purging the subconscious of any old anger, any old resentments that we've been carrying for a long time, and freeing the mind from these negative attachments so that we can move to a higher level of consciousness. We can move beyond needs to see things as separate and move towards unified consciousness. So recognizing how everything is interconnected. We're interconnected with everything else around us and everyone else. So whatever we're doing, whatever we're thinking, whatever actions we're taking, whatever beliefs we're holding on to has an impact on other people, regardless of what we may think. Everything is interconnected. No action ever takes place in a vacuum. Every action we commit unleashes ripples through the collective consciousness, and those ripples come back to us in one way, shape or form. So if we don't want to bring a load of karma on ourselves through unleashing anger willy-nilly and spewing that anger onto people who haven't actually really done anything to us, that's just going to reap more karma for ourselves. So if we are feeling particularly angry or feeling a lot of volatile emotions coming up, it's very important that we take a moment to center ourselves, to detach the emotion from the issue and figure out what is the core issue, what's the core reason of why the anger is coming up now. Is it something that's happening now, or is it actually something that's happened in the past and that our mind is now ready to deal with, but we need to make sure that we actually deal with it consciously and we don't just project it onto other people as a coping mechanism, so we're not actually dealing with the core issue, we're just transferring it onto someone else. Now the ruler of this particular eclipse is Uranus, and Uranus in Taurus is square to this particular eclipse. So the Uranian energy is particularly strong, and this may, for some of us it may feel chaotic, but this only really is the case if we're resistant to embracing new insights and we're resistant to embracing any new change, because at some level we all actually know what change we need to make in our lives. It's not some we say we don't know, but deep down at some level we do know, and Uranus is trying to awaken us to this inner knowing. But for us to embrace that inner knowing, we actually have to have the courage to embrace change, to acknowledge the insights coming through and taking the risks we may feel uncomfortable making, but will actually bring us close to who we are and allow us to express who we are. It's also, Uranus in Taurus is trying to bring a message that the time for just focusing on ourselves and creating material things purely for our own gain is coming to an end. If we truly want to manifest things now, we now need to be looking at a more humanitarian level, and the value systems that we hold dear need to be transformed through renewing the mind, through releasing values that are shallow and materialistic, and instead embracing a more humanitarian perspective where we recognise that helping other people doesn't, obviously it depends on who we're working with. If we work with people who exploit others, then obviously that's going to be a problem, but if we seek to work with like-minded people and share the resources that we have rather than keeping them to ourselves, then much greater things can be achieved. So more can be achieved with less as such. It's unlocking that synergy that comes about when people willingly share their own resources with one another and help each other out by sharing the same tools with one another, so that less resources are needed to achieve the same result, and working as a team effort now rather than going solo with everything will also help us to manifest things better. But it also requires us to work on ourselves. It's Uranus square to the Sun is reminding us that We have to transform that spark of creativity within us. We have to embrace a humanitarian perspective around it, and we have to transform our core sense of self so that it honours that divine spark within us, but also honours the spark within every single one of us and helps nurture that spark through the sharing of resources and helping one another see each other's worth, by encouraging one another to be true to who we are and to express our authentic selves, and encourage one another to work together and come together in a spirit of unity and love. We also have Chiron forming a trine to the Sun and a sextile to the Moon in South Node here. So what we're looking at here is seeing where do the wounds to the sense of self affect the courage, how willing we are to make changes, and where do we still hold on to emotional wounds and wounds to the sense of identity, and where do we need to transform them so that we're not shining our light for our own sake, or not shining to try and big ourselves up at the expense of others. It's developing a more transpersonal perspective and seeing how by shining our light for the benefit of others, it encourages other people to shine in their own rights. But this requires that we transform our own internal dialogue or monologues. It requires that we transform the way we define ourselves, which is the whole point of the Chiron in Aries transit, and we become aware of the wounds that stop us from expressing ourselves authentically. So there's quite a lot to take on board here, but the main point of this particular eclipse is that we have to take responsibility for ourselves. We have to let go of the past now. Holding on to the past is not going to do us any favours. There comes a point where the amount of energy it takes to hold on to something is greater than the energy required to let go of it. So what do we need to let go of? So where do we have a tendency to be aloof? Where do we have a fear of being who we are, so we just go with the crowd but never move beyond it? And where do we have a tendency to rely on group consciousness rather than being true to who we are? And where are we experiencing anger at the collective level, or anger at what's going on around us? And how can this anger be transformed into assertiveness so we make the necessary changes? We move beyond just being happy with having spiritual knowledge, and instead we start moving towards a place where we're embodying those principles, embodying those insights through taking action, through taking moderate risks, but moving from the third eye kind of chakra to the heart chakra. So it's living our truths rather than just espousing them. It's sharing the truths through embodying them, through living them out, and through having the courage to be who we are and pursue our own personal dreams. Because the thing is, the health of the whole is dependent on the health of the parts. So if the collective consciousness is going to raise, it requires that we as individuals take responsibility for our own lives. We take responsibility for our own journeys. We follow the path that is right for who we are. We encourage other people to do the same. So we're not trying to prove ourselves better than anyone else. We shine our own light through being the best versions of ourselves possible. And if people are inspired by it and choose to learn to be the best versions of themselves as well, then great. If people don't want to do that, they're happy, they just want to be followers of what other people are saying, that's ultimately their choice. It's not our place to tell them what they should be doing. The best way to teach is through embodying the principles rather than espousing them. Because the time of talk is over, the time of walking the walk and not just talking talk is here. So this is a time for us all to embody our truth rather than just espousing it, to move beyond just the pursuit of spiritual knowledge and instead understand it and apply it in our lives and live out the principles that we espouse, so that we are a living, breathing example of our own philosophy. We're not just someone spouting a load of philosophy but not living up to it, at which point people are well within their right to accuse us of hypocrisy, and they're well within their right to ignore what we're saying because we're not living up to it. So if we truly desire change, if we truly desire empowerment, then we have to take responsibility for our lives. We have to move beyond rigid thinking, to let go of the past and open our minds up to new concepts, to higher levels of consciousness that transcend separation and see the underlying unity behind everything. And we make sure that whatever goals or actions that we're pursuing honour that essential unity of life, that honours the natural cycles, that honours the divine spark within ourselves and others, and inspires other people to make that same shift. But it only happens if we take action. The astrology doesn't force it upon us. It highlights the key lessons to be learned at this time. It's up to us then to learn those lessons, to apply them, to overcome any old issues that crop up, and to not create new karma for ourselves through just spewing our anger willy-nilly. Instead, we need to own our pasts and let go of what no longer serves us, to make space for the future. So I hope this lunar eclipse in Aquarius brings you many new insights, much releasing of the past, and a transformation through the renewing of the mind, so the ground is paved or cleared to pave a way for a new way of being for you, that honours your essential spark of divinity, that encourages you to be the best version of yourself possible, and you then serve as an example to others through practicing what we preach and through living our truths rather than just talking about them. So may the lunar eclipse bring you many blessings and much insight into yourself. Take care and be blessed.